This is your morning brief for Thursday, June 20th. A couple of new reports out from us. Pause for Starbucks. We're trying to do a play on words. I don't know how well that worked out, but take a break for have a coffee and take a break on the stock. Pause for Starbucks. We probably could have done a better job on the title, but you get the idea. And go have a look at that video. And then we have Dunkin brands back on track. I think that's a little more self-explanatory. I'd actually swap one out for the other since they're both in the same space, and I think Dunkin brands just looks a little bit better right now. The Fed left interest rates unchanged, but committed to acting appropriately to sustain the expansion. And some interpret that as the Fed's cutting rates down the road. I interpret it as they could do either, to be honest, but they're under some pressure to lower rates. There is a global slowdown, seems to be anticipated. Other central banks are lowering interest rates, so from that regard, I guess they could easily lower interest rates. Oil is up after Iranian military shoots down a U.S. drone. Some argument about whether it was in international airspace or in Iranian airspace. Regardless, there's been tension in the Middle East, especially between U.S. and Iran. And anytime there's tension, oil does go up. Anytime there's tension in the Middle East, and it has been a dampened effect relative to the past because it would disrupt oil supply. But oil supply is more diversified around the world now than it used to be. So the U.S. is producing more oil than ever before. So it shouldn't affect it as much, but it will affect it. And you can see that oil is up on this news. Earnings report. So Darden and Kroger report before the bell. Darden shares are lower as growth disappointed. Darden has been doing quite well. And investors were just raising their expectations, and this kind of didn't meet it. It was still a decent quarter. I thought it was a little light on growth, actually, so I kind of agree with the market. And same-store sales were only 1.6% increase. When your stock has run up and things are getting better, that's not a massive improvement. On the complete other end here, we have Kroger, and their shares are flat on the fact that sales and profits didn't decline as much as anticipated. So they're in decline. I still don't want anything to do with this just because they declined less. That's not, it's like a second derivative of sales. I want climbing sales. I'm not going to parse it out to the second derivative where they're declining at a slower rate kind of thing. So I'm not there on Kroger yet. I'd like to see it turn around. It used to be a pretty good company, but they're in a bit of hurt right now. Canopy Growth and Red Hat report after the bell. So Canopy Growth is in one of our model portfolios. Very, very small position because it doesn't really fit our model, our way of looking at the world. But, we had to be there, and this was the biggest one, and we thought, okay, let's just be there in the world of cannabis, but very small way. Although in a bigger way, we actually own it through Constellation Brands, so I'm going to be watching it to see the effect more so on what happens with Constellation Brands. I still think it has potential. Like I said, this is not our space. A startup with no cash flow is just not our space. But I still think this one has potential. And Red Hat also reports after the bell. And Red Hat has been bought out by IBM, and that should go through. It just hasn't gone through yet, so they're still reporting. And this will have an effect on IBM shares, if it's good, bad, or indifferent. Let's hope that it's good for IBM's sake. Futures are up, especially the NASDAQ futures. Let me just see if I can get the latest reading here in a real-time way. And it is up about 140 basis points, which is pretty strong. Anything over, I'd say over 1 is really quite strong. Even over 50 basis points is a reasonable indication. So this is 140 basis points. The Dow's up about 90 basis points. S&P futures up about 100 basis points. So I expect a pretty decent rally to open. Let's just check a couple of tech stocks. Let's do Microsoft. Since the Nasdaq, Microsoft's about 140 basis points as well. Let's do Applied Materials, about 235 basis points or 2.35%. Let's do LAM, LRCX about 2.11%. So you get the idea. All right, that's your morning brief for Thursday, June 20th. Let's find some gems.